So I'm Katie O'Leary, and I've been a member of this church for about 25 years. So it's I apologize for scheduling this for such good weather, but thanks for those of you who are here. We're going to try and make this worth your while. So Live Well actually has been part of Connecticut since 1992, and we partner with people who are impacted by dementia. Today we'll cover some dementia basics. We'll also talk about, we'll see a really cool video that Deirdre found for us, as well as connection and support during this time and resources for support. And then we'll take some time, as Tracy mentioned, to just kind of talk. I'll be joined by two wonderful colleagues, Dan Vilanek, who's our Director of Counseling Services, as well as Deirdre Summerer, who is our navigator. That is essentially somebody who can guide you or anyone living with or impacted by dementia through the process of identifying resources and getting support. So Live Well, and I should mention too, we changed our name from the Alzheimer's Resource Center to Live Well because it reflects, and this was a few years ago, it reflects that we feel strongly and we support that you can live well with dementia. So, and to us, living well means, as it says here, having continued purpose, social connection, growth, belonging, and access to resources that you need, and that's whether you live with us or you live in the community. And when it comes to purpose, we're very much behind what that means in the world. And with regard to giving people opportunity to advocate, to reduce stigma, we are part of Dementia Friendly America. In fact, what I do in Southington is lead a dementia friendly community initiative. And we're also the state lead for a dementia-friendly program called Dementia Friends. And that is really designed, and this is a global movement, this is designed to change the way people think, act, and talk about dementia. And Dementia Peer Coalition, I'll hold on that because Dan and Deirdre are very involved in that, and Dan will speak to that later. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to Deirdre. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So these are on our campus, although most of our work that we do is in the community, as you can see. We do have a campus in Southington, which where we have 133 people living with dementia who live with us in our skilled nursing and assisted living facility. So I do want to talk about some of the community programs that we have. In particular, I'm going to start with Community Connections Outings Group. Currently it is being offered virtually. But prior to the pandemic, this group would go out in small groups of 5 to 8 people, and they would go to factories. Prior to the COVID, they were at a pizza palace learning how to make personal-sized pan pizzas. So currently, one of the things I spoke with there, Maria, who runs the program, they were doing Zumba through Zoom. They were also had a live entertainer. And then they did some meditation using color. So this is a group that has experiential trips, and they decide where they want to go. So that is for persons living well with dementia. Then we go to our support groups, and that Katie mentioned is the Memory Cafe, and then we do have a dementia support group for care partners. So the Dementia Peer Coalition, and Dan will talk about that too, but this is a wonderful group. I feel very privileged to attend these meetings as a process coach. These are people living well with dementia, a support group by persons living with dementia for persons living with dementia only. Currently, it is being offered over Zoom, and care partners have been encouraged to join, and they are joining with their loved ones at this time. But this group right now is, like I said, meeting over Zoom, but typically it meets in Southington, New Haven, out of Yale, and then in Bristol. So that is a very well attended group. Right now we have anywhere from 15 and up people attending that support group on Zoom. And then we do have a care partner support group. And what I'm told, I have not gone to that one, but what I am told is that there are care partners that continue to go to that. though their loved one is no longer with us. So that kind of tells you the connections that are made and the support that is provided through that wonderful group. Next is our Resilient Living with Dementia program services, and that includes the navigation, which I do, but Resilient Living is a wonderful program that starts with education. So we have a Resilient Living series, First Steps and Next Steps, and that is where we, again, they're live and also via Zoom, telephone, however anyone can get to those. They're usually 6-part series, and they'll start with knowledge, education, all the way down to planning. We've had attorneys, Dan and our palliative care physician, Dr. Ann Kenny, do come into those meetings and do that series and talk about many different aspects of end-of-life care, support, stress. So that is a Resilient Living. The second arm of that is the navigation program. And navigation is what I do. This is where people, persons living with dementia newly diagnosed, or their care partners are together, come and meet with myself, my colleague Erica DiFrancesco. We work with families to help them navigate. It's exactly what that is we meet them where they are at. It's a new diagnosis, they having new challenges, not knowing what to do, how to move forward. Many people end up coming to us, quite frankly, with a diagnosis from a doctor, and they say, we don't know what to do next. And we are there to support them. So it's they feel, again, very privileged to be able to do that program. And we do have great success with it. Next, occupational therapy services that we offer. This is a very unique program, evidence-based. And this is where occupational therapists, who are also dementia specialists, work with care partners. They work with people living alone with dementia, or they work with both. So one is COPE, that's a program where they go in and they work with care partners and the person living with dementia to develop strategies, how to manage challenges and changes that may occur, and just a general education support. Skills to Care is a program where it's based solely for the care partner and giving them strategies. And then there's HBMR, which is called Home-Based Memory Rehabilitation. And that's for the person newly diagnosed with dementia and helping them to, where did I put my keys? Remember where to get medications. So that is, and it really is, again, any of these programs, it's what the person needs. We really don't go in and say, this is what you need. We kind of find out where people are and we take it from there. Counseling services, you will hear from my colleague Dan, and he does offer counseling at LiveWell. Right now he is doing it through Zoom and telephonic. He will talk more about that, but he does work with persons living with dementia or their care partners. And he also does mindfulness, right, Dan? He'll probably speak more to that, but mindfulness behavior, mindful-based cognitive therapy and mindfulness-based stress reduction, which many of us could use. We've asked him many times to help us, and he is quite skilled at helping us to reduce the stress that many of us are feeling right now. Our geriatrician and palliative care physician is Dr. Ann Kenny. She is also the author of Making Tough Decisions About End-of-Life Care in Dementia, which is very unique. She brings her own personal experience as a palliative care physician, having walked the walk, if you will. This book is about her experience along with her siblings in caring for their mother with dementia. She also helps with an advanced care planning, end-of-life care planning. Along with, I believe, Dan and the navigators, we also help people to get to advanced care planning and end-of-life decisions. So those are, it's kind of a little very brief explanation of the services that we offer.
Thank you, Deirdre. And we really appreciate the opportunity to be with you all this afternoon to talk about this concept of dementia. And so my name is Dan Bolanek, Director of Counseling Services at LiveWell, as Katie and Deirdre alluded. And so I will talk a little bit about what is dementia, how do we understand these changes that happen in someone's life. And so dementia really is a category, a broad category to understand conditions changes and deteriorations within the brain. And it's actually an interrelationship, as we understand it to be, between these neurological changes that affect memory, but they also affect other areas, such as visual spatial cues, so understanding kind of your body in space and where things are. These neurological changes also affect language, speech, vocabulary. They affect processing of information and the rate and the speed at which we process information. They affect executive functioning, and that's a fancy term for basic planning and task orientation, how you make your way through tasks throughout your day. And they also impact other sensory experiences. And so these brain changes that happen as a result from these neurological conditions, broadly understood as dementia, are also in relationship to psychosocial factors. So that includes our relationship to the world and our relationship to the people around us. Dementia is a broad umbrella term, and there are many different types of dementia, Alzheimer's disease being the primary type. It's the most common type of dementia, but there are others. Alzheimer's disease is a particular type that manifests itself typically first with short-term memory, and then has further changes to the brain from that point. But there are other types of dementia, such as dementia that's caused by a vascular disease, so blood vessel changes within the brain. There are another type called frontotemporal degeneration, which affects this part of the brain up here, which is really where a lot of that executive functioning happens, and some of the language skills as well. And then there are dementias that result from things like Parkinson's disease, Lewy body, and other neurological conditions. And so a dementia really is this broad umbrella term to describe these neurological, these brain changes that people experience. And so as people experience these changes, they also experience changes in their life. And so how I used to relate to the world and how the world used to relate to me changes as a result of this, what's happening within the brain. And so sometimes we just say, oh, this is a brain problem. But in fact, what we really understand dementia to be is this relationship between these brain changes and the external world and the environment. And how we can, as partners for people living with dementia and their partners in life, how we can help to support them and navigate their world with these changes is important. And so we'll talk about ways to do that. Okay, no, there we go. And so what we'll do now is watch a brief video from the NIA, the National Institute on Aging, which we'll share, and we'll have time to discuss at the end as well. So hopefully this works.
In healthy people, all sensations, movements, thoughts, memories, and feelings are the result of signals that pass through billions of nerve cells or neurons in the brain. Neurons constantly communicate with each other through electrical charges that travel down axons, causing the release of chemicals across tiny gaps to neighboring neurons. Other cells in the brain, such as astrocytes and microglia, clear away debris and help keep neurons healthy. In a person with Alzheimer's disease, the most basic form of dementia, toxic changes in the brain destroy this healthy balance. These changes may occur years, even decades, before the first signs of dementia. Researchers believe that this process involves two proteins called beta amyloid and tau, which somehow become toxic to the brain. It appears that abnormal tau accumulates, eventually forming tangles inside neurons. And beta amyloid clumps into plaques, which slowly build up between neurons. As the level of amyloid reaches a tipping point, there is a rapid spread of tau throughout the brain. But tau and beta amyloid may not be the only factors involved in Alzheimer's. Other changes that affect the brain may also play a role over time. The vascular system may fail to deliver sufficient blood and nutrients to the brain. The brain may lack the glucose needed to power its activity. Chronic inflammation sets in as microglial cells fail to clear away debris, and astrocytes react to distressed microglia. Eventually, neurons lose their ability to communicate. As neurons die, the brain shrinks, beginning in the hippocampus, a part of the brain important to learning and memory. People may begin to experience memory loss, impaired decision-making, and language problems. As more neurons die throughout the brain, a person with Alzheimer's gradually loses the ability to think, remember, make decisions, and function independently. Achieving a deeper understanding of the molecular and cellular mechanisms and how they may interact is vital to the development of effective therapies. Much progress has been made in identifying various underlying factors. Advances in brain imaging allow us to see the course of plaques and tangles in the living brain. Blood and fluid biomarkers are providing insights about when the disease starts and how it progresses. More is also known about the genetic underpinnings of the disease and how they can affect particular biological pathways. These advances enable the development and testing of promising new therapies, including drugs that reduce or clear the increase of tau and amyloid proteins in the brain, therapies targeting the vascular system, glucose metabolism, and inflammation, and lifestyle interventions like exercise or diet, and behavioral approaches like social engagement that may enhance brain health. Research is moving quickly, ever closer to the day when we can delay or even prevent the devastation of dementia.
Okay, so that was just a little video kind of on the neurological experience. But the rest of our topic today, we're going to discuss kind of those last couple topics, how social engagement, how activity can actually support people to live well with dementia, as well as how we can support the care partners, those who live with them and love them, to live well too. And so oftentimes people come to us and say, how can I help? What can I do? My loved one has this experience. What's the next step? The very first step really for any relationship, and this is regardless of someone has dementia or not, is getting to know the person. And so in order to help someone who's living with dementia or the care partner, we need to understand what makes them tick, what gives them sense of joy and meaning in their life. People who are experiencing brain changes still have the opportunities to have purpose, to engage the world, and to relate to it. And how to find ways for that person to do that is unique and individual to each person. You'll hear us in our language, we talk about care partners rather than caregivers, and that is intentional. We do that because we understand that care giving is not just giving, it's also receiving. It's a relationship. And so care partnering, whether it's us as professional care partners or as family care partners, the role really is to understand how I can support a person living with these brain changes, but also what can I learn from them? How can I receive the blessings and the joys that they have to offer me in this particular time as well? The third way to connect is what's called the Just Right Challenge. Many people who are living with changes in their brain due to dementia sometimes what we do is we take away everything that is a challenge to them, right? And so if you struggle in one area of your life, we're going to take it all away. Or the other opposite reaction is we're going to try to push you to continue to do this thing that's a struggle for you. And so what we need to do is find what are the areas for people living with dementia. This is where occupational therapists are particularly good at finding just the right amount of challenge for someone to feel like they are contributing to either their community or to their home, but not providing too much of a challenge that it's overwhelming for them. And so that takes some professional expertise and knowledge of the person to understand where that balance point is. I just had a conversation with the family on Friday around someone struggling in the cooking process. And the family was saying, well, they just can't cook anymore. And I said, well, hold on. What can they do? Can they still chop an onion? Can they still put the ingredients together? Can they still, what part of the activity can they do? And so it's finding the right balance of that. Another way to connect and offer support is through the promotion and supporting of activity. People living with dementia will tell me that one of the most important things for them to do to maintain their sense of self, their sense of dignity, their sense of who they are, is to maintain activity, to maintain a certain level of engagement, to keep their mind active, their bodies active, and their hearts active. Just like when I don't go to the gym or I don't run, it's hard when I start back up again, right? And so even for people living with cognitive changes, to keep the brain engaged, and that's through social interaction. That's hard these days, but through Zoom and other platforms, it's possible. To keep the body moving, right? We actually need to keep the body moving too, and we need to keep our hearts moving to help other people in our communities and to find those points of meaning and purpose. And then the last thing, breaking down tasks. People living with cognitive changes often have a difficulty with completing a task. You know, this is that executive functioning that I referenced before. So whereas someone may have previously been able to, let's say, jump on a computer and jump on a Zoom call, for example, we may need to have certain prompts for them along the way to help them to do that in a way that works for them. So breaking down tasks into smaller bits can often be helpful, and helping them to get over that initial hurdle called initiation is often really helpful. And so what we wanted to do is offer some resources for engagement and connection. And I'll kind of quickly go through some of these because I do want to make sure we leave some time for Q&A for you all. So the first one is music and memory. And some of you may have been exposed to this before, but if not, just briefly, if I were to do a brain scan of somebody watching TV, their brain might light up a little bit, go boop, boop, right? You might see those little activity levels in the PET scan. But if I actually play music for them, and particularly music that brings them a sense of enjoyment that they loved as a teenager, young adult, for example, you'll see their brain activity light up. And what we know is that music in a very profound way can provide sense of brain stimulation, even to the point where it actually spurs on some skills of language, of memory, of all these things. It's kind of a back door, so to speak, back entrance to those experiences that people have. And so it's well documented and studied. And so I say to people often, how much music are you listening to? And perhaps providing some homework for them to do it more often. I'm trying to do that myself. Another way for people to engage right now is through virtual tours. I mean, there's actually a host of virtual tours that are being offered now as a result of the COVID-19 experience, whether that's the National Parks Service, whether that's museums, whether that's different art galleries. There's actually a number of resources that we can share with you all if you're interested, that people can take advantage of at this time to provide that sense of stimulation, of engagement, of interest, of creativity. All those things are important for people living with cognitive change and their partners in care and life. Time Slips is a really lovely program. In short, it's a program for people who are living with changes as they age to their memory and their brain, to encourage them to express themselves through the arts. So that's through story, through poetry, through art itself, through a whole host of things on how to ask people what they call beautiful questions. And out of those beautiful questions that don't require people to respond out of memory, but ask people to respond out of their creative selves, people living with cognitive change can engage. There's also life story projects, whether it's, one is called Commemorate, another one is the Legacy Storytellers Program. Those are opportunities for people to express their story. You know, people living with dementia have a long history of self and of personhood, and how do we capture that to really honor their full experience of who they are as a human being. So that you can kind of Google some of those resources and find them. They're really great. Next, on the social side, I'm going to flip over to Memory Cafe and let Katie take over for a moment, because this is a particular passion of hers.
Yes, thanks, Dan. As Dan mentioned earlier, social connection is huge, and with the isolation associated with the virus, a real challenge. So a memory cafe is something we don't have a lot of in Connecticut. It's actually something that originated years ago in Europe. It is a social gathering. It's just a social group of people who are living with dementia and their care partners to come together and just kind of check the dementia at the door, because it's not a support group, it's not a day program, and it's not respite care. It is simply a chance to come together and have some fun, have some social interaction, and to be with people who are having a similar experience. We know, we're all members of affinity groups, whether it's book clubs or moms groups or whatever. This is a way to come together and to be in the company of others who are dealing with some of what you're dealing with. And so, given the times right now, what we've done is we have transitioned LiveWell's once a month in-person event to a virtual cafe, so that twice a month, I've got two groups actually who come together on Zoom twice a month and just share some time together, do some icebreaker questions. There's usually a theme, and I'm always struck by the end of it how much laughter and connection there is. And then of course there's the opportunity to get together in between meetings for social distance walks or whatever, but it's just more important than ever to come together in whatever way we can. And certainly if you're living with dementia or supporting someone who is, especially important. Back
Great,
to you.
thanks, Katie. Deirdre had mentioned about the Community Connections program. That's now a virtual platform. She also mentioned about the Dementia Peer Coalition. I'm going to expand just a little on that, and thank you, Deirdre, for talking about those options, especially the support group aspect of the Dementia Peer Coalition. But it really was started by a gentleman named Bob Savage, who has been a lifelong advocate for people who are underserved in the state of Connecticut, and started really his career around those who are struggling with addictions. Upon his own experience of being diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, wanted to find a platform where people living with Alzheimer's and related dementia could experience peer support, could provide a platform for education, could have opportunities for advocacy, and could engage in research. And so those are the areas that the Dementia Peer Coalition here in Connecticut are interested in. And I have the great fortune to be now on the board of the Dementia Peer Coalition, a newly minted 501c3 nonprofit. And so it's really exciting, the work that we're going to be doing to expand the mission for people living with dementia to speak for themselves on the topic of importance for them. And sometimes we get caught up in, we as professionals, know best, and I realize I know very little. And so better to have people with a lived experience really speak from that perspective. There's also on that form, the Dementia Action Alliance, which is a nationwide effort here in the United States. And they have a lot of activities in terms of education, advocacy, research, and some support as well. And so you can Google them. They're a really beautiful organization that really is led by and guided by people living with dementia. Within Connecticut, there's another opportunity. It's called the GAP group. And that GAP stands for Giving Alzheimer's Purpose. There's a number of groups around Connecticut, and they're hosted by the Alzheimer's Association. And so it's another opportunity for people living with dementia to engage both socially and find meaningful activities. So next we're going to talk about community supports and resources. Katie, this is kind of back to you. The first one, Dementia Friends and Dementia Friendly Connecticut. I don't know if you spoke about it a little bit. I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more here.
Sure, thanks. It really has, it's as I mentioned, it's a global program, but what it does is it raises a level of awareness. And when I say it, I mean Dementia Friends Connecticut. Dementia Friends is an information session. Dementia Friendly is the community-friendly movements. Both of them raise a level of public awareness of dementia. If you're not personally affected by dementia through your family or friends, you may not have any sense at all other than some vague notion of a very old person in a wheelchair being unresponsive somewhere. Even if you do have personal experience, you might have in your mind that that's what it looks like. And of course, if you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person. So this movement and these programs allow, I think, to expand the thinking, to remove stigma, and also, and very importantly, and I know I can speak for myself, it puts it on the radar in a way that it might not have been on the radar at all before, such that, to give you a quick example, I was on a flight back in October between Chicago and San Diego. It was a 3+ hour, almost 4-hour flight. And the lights were down. I'm sitting on the aisle, and a woman, big plane, long flight, and a woman coming up and down the aisle kind of met my eyes. And she said to me with a kind of a chuckle, she said, "Leave it to me to get lost on a plane." And so I kind of chuckled back and I said, "Hey, are you really lost?" And I, quiet voice, I said, "Are you really lost?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, can I help?" And she said, "Well, I'm going to go look again." And I said, "Well, do, but sure, please come back if you don't find it, because I'm sure this happens all the time and I'm happy to help you figure it out." Well, she did come back, and we engaged the flight attendant with her permission. And while he was away checking her last name on the flight log, she and I chatted for a while, and the flight attendant came back and told her that she was in row 8. Well, I was in row 33. She had no idea where on the plane she was. I don't think, had I not done Dementia Friends stuff, I don't think it ever would have occurred to me that she was experiencing some cognitive change. All she needed was a little bit of help, and that's what I was able to give her. But had I not been kind of aware, I might have just laughed it off, and off she would have gone to continue what must have been a really scary experience that could have ended traumatically. So I am just such a fan of these programs and what they do for all of us as we work to support each other in community and make community accessible to people who are in the early stages of cognitive change, and all they need is a little bit of help.
A lovely example, Katie, and thank you for those words. And I think raising the awareness and consciousness of all of us in the community around how we can help to support people to live well with dementia and make sure they're maintained within the fabric of our communities rather than on the outskirts is really crucial. And Dementia Friends, and specifically Dementia Friendly Communities Connecticut, are lovely ways to do that. So thank you for talking about that. From a more practical side, there are certain grants within the state of Connecticut. One is a respite grant that provides a certain amount of funds and money for people to receive support, whether that's in the form of in-home care or day program or other services. And those respite grants are provided through the area agencies on aging, of which there are many around the state. I think there are 5 total in the 5 regions of Connecticut. And so it's an access point for people who are 60 or older in the state. Deirdre, did I jump you here? Were you going to talk about home care program, or did we? I'll keep going. Okay. So the home care program for elders is another wonderful resource. It is what's called a waiver program in the state of Connecticut, which basically means it waives the strict requirements for Medicaid and expands those services for older adults who are 65 and older, who need certain level of support and care in their community. And so it's a really lovely program that provides a host of resources and supports for people who are living with changes to their memory and in their physical selves, so that they can be supported in home for those who desire that. I used to be a care manager for this program, and so it's really important and something Connecticut should be really proud of, because not all states have this. On another side, Prepare for Your Care. This is actually a website that you can go to and sign up for, and it's guidance for, I would say, anybody on how to prepare for your care. So it helps guide you through advanced care planning. It helps guide you through questions about how you want your care to go as we age. It's a lovely resource. It has nice videos. It has questions you can talk about with your family. It's a really lovely resource, because we really push at Live Well for people who are saying something's not right, or something, I'm not sure something is right with my memory. First of all, to get an early diagnosis, because the earlier you get that diagnosis, the more options become available to you. And an option that is important for all of us is to have a voice and to have a say in how our own care will go. And so that's really important, because we know as memory changes and as cognition changes, and that when we experience further brain changes, my ability to articulate what I want, my ability to speak to what I want can be compromised. And so having an ability to do that earlier on, when I have my language skills, when I have my good executive functioning and my thinking skills, that's really important. So Prepare for Your Care is a lovely resource to talk about what are oftentimes difficult topics. But I will say for myself, this particular time of the COVID-19 pandemic has led me to create my own advanced care plans, and found that to be very actually important process for me, especially when I've got a 5-month-old. Nope. So my phone didn't get that. But it's an important process for all of us to go through. In terms of supports, on the other side, we talked about the Dementia Peer Coalition. Deirdre mentioned the caregiver support groups that happen at Live Well, but know also that there are a host of different caregiver support groups throughout the state of Connecticut, hosted by different entities, as well as the Alzheimer's Association. They actually have a listing on their website, and so I encourage you to go there or access our resources for people that you may know that may have difficulty managing some of the things that they're experiencing. We know that caregivers have a lot of stress. As a counselor, I know the research shows that regular caregivers have a certain amount of stress, advanced beyond what we typically have if we're not caregivers. And caregivers for people living with dementia have a much more likelihood of depression, anxiety, stress levels than even regular caregivers. Okay, so this particular group of caregivers needs a lot of resources and supports. And so those are available, and encourage you, if you know people or you or yourself are a caregiver, to access those. This next one's called respite care. And I'm going to put this in terms of, this is really, it's different from the respite grants. Respite care is for people who are supporting their loved ones at home, but they may need a time for respite. They may need a time to get a break. And so there are entities, residential communities, assisted livings, and so forth, that will provide care for a couple weeks, a month, so that caregivers can get the breaks that they need, whether that's for R&R, whether that's for going to see family members that they haven't seen in a while, or for any host of other reasons. So there are entities and organizations that do provide for that respite care. There are also adult day programs. That's a particular resource that I love. I ran the day program at LiveWell for many years, and it's a beautiful resource. And the challenge I think many organizations are finding is, that's a social, physical place. And so they're having difficulty figuring that out. But I know a couple day programs are starting to open up, reopen. And so just know that's a resource that provides that meaningful engagement that we talked about before that was really important. And then there's always this option of long-term care. And people will often have the question, when will I know when this is needed? How will I know if this is needed? Whether for myself, if that were to come to pass, or for my loved one. And this is where engaging with professionals, engaging with people who know the levels of support that are needed, it really is helpful for you to manage those decisions, because these are not easy decisions. And so those are all the resources and supports within the community that are available for people at this time. So we've reached the discussion, sharing, Q&A time. It was a lot of information in a very short amount of time. We could probably have 10 hours of material, but we tried to give you the most salient and quick points that we could for our discussion today. So thank you for listening.